I have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you can find all we do at undergroundusa.com. Most of the nation and the free world is breathing a sigh of relief at the exit of Joe Biden and Obama 2.0 from power. We see this as the beginning of the end of neo-Marxist wokeism. But while we celebrate the probable return to constitutionality and the downsizing of our federal government, some well-funded far-left disruptors see an opportunity to create chaos. A small group that played a role in the effort to disqualify Donald Trump from ballots before the 2024 general election is already propagandizing for impeachment proceedings against the 47th president. The Free Speech for People nonprofit organization is spearheading the call for impeachment, insisting this.
Blah, 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 blah.
Trump has refused to sell his ownership stake in companies through which he is assured to receive substantial payments from foreign governments in violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause. At least 5 foreign governments pay a combined $2 million per month in fees for their units in Trump World Tower. And because all 5 of these foreign governments are currently paying Trump these monthly fees, Trump is in violation of the Foreign Emoluments Clause from the moment he took the oath of office.
The group is pursuing this ridiculousness, even though CBS News and myriad other news outlets reported in January of 2017 that Trump resigned from all positions of authority and management within the Trump Organization and its affiliates, and that his sons Don and Eric are fully in charge of the company. Expecting Trump to sell his shares in the Trump Organization while he's not in an official capacity decision-making role is similar to requiring members of Congress to sell stocks in companies and organizations that could be impacted by the legislation they are considering. So the expectation exposes the gross hypocrisy of the hyper-partisan, Trump-hating left at the Free Speech for People organization. Now, the real issue is not so much the Free Speech for People nonprofit itself, but rather the typical neo-Marxist progressive donor and philanthropic organizations, and I use the term philanthropic very loosely, that finance groups like this one. It's the dark money of the far-left transformative deep state oligarchy and their never-ending financial commitment to undermine the will of the American people that's the problem. That's the cancer in the system that needs to be exposed and then expunged. 2 main groups behind the new effort to divide our nation, purely for opportunistic, partisan, transformative, and power play purposes, are the Tides Foundation and Arabella Advisors. According to the Independent Journal Review,
the Tides Foundation, a key cog in the wider left-wing Tides philanthropic network, which combined to shell out $850 million in 2022, is a major financial backer of Free Speech for People. The Tides Foundation gave grants exceeding $250,000 to the legal nonprofit in 2020, 2022, and 2023, and a combined $925,816 since Iki Bin on Doku's.
The article's author, Nick Pope, goes on to say that the Hopewell Fund granted the Free Speech for People anti-Trump effort $20,000 in 2023. The Hopewell Fund is one of several nonprofits boosting transformative neo-Marxist causes under the management of liberal dark money juggernaut Arabella Advisors, a major for-profit consultancy established by Clinton administration veteran Eric Kessler and funded by some of the worst anti-freedom advocates around the globe, including Bill Gates, George Soros, Mark Zuckerberg, Fidelity Charity Gift Fund, and Hans-Georg Weiss, a foreign national billionaire, He's donated substantial amounts, notably $500 million to the 1630 Fund, which has been used for various leftist political initiatives. Incidentally, the same cast of characters, and more of the usual suspect far-left advocate cabal, Google, Soros's Open Society Foundations, the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations, and Pierre Omidyar and Warren Buffett, financially support the Tides Foundation. These are the kinds of organizations that cause the divide in our country. It's less about the radicals they dupe into subservience, who constitute the far-left ideologue voting public, and more about the agitators in organizations like these that stoke partisanship by advocating for destructive and baseless actions like the impeachments of presidents from the first days of their administrations, regardless of political party or political affiliation. These are the transformative neo-Marxist opportunists and agitators. These are the people and organizations that comprise the deep state cabal that must be marginalized and expunged from influence on Capitol Hill. This is the anti-freedom and anti-American influence that the American people mandated President Trump to eradicate from the halls of power. Because we have free speech rights in the United States, we can't go after the cabal's message, or the message trumpeted by the Free Speech for People nonprofit, as imbecilic as that message may be. But we can expose them as disingenuous and opportunistic political partisan assassins and pressure their donors and donor corporations to shun them financially. Bleeding these organizations, the Tides Foundation, Arabella, the Ford Foundation, etc., so that they have to draw their finances from an ever more limited pool of ideological zealots, marginalizes their ability to attack the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as they routinely do. It also sends a message that we, the people, disapprove of impeachment as a partisan political tactic and believe it should be reserved for only the most extreme circumstances. And lastly, it sledgehammers them between the eyes with the unmistakable message that we, the people, are done with this far-left Alinskyite tactical bullshit, and that if they continue to act so childishly, they will suffer consequences that will result in their being dropped from the elitist class for their personal and institutional poverty. Let's face it, we punished Disney, Anheuser-Busch, and several other organizations into subservience after their woke activism, bringing them to their knees. We can do it to these philanthropic organizations and their benefactors as well. Striking their wallets to punish their intellectual infantilism is the only way to get the message across to them. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station, WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida.
You're listening to Underground USA.
A free and independent media is the backbone of our great republic. So it's crucial to have media outlets that aren't influenced by big tech censorship or the leftist mainstream media complex. But that means supporting journalistic outlets that bring us the truth without spinning facts to push a narrative. For less than the cost of a cup of coffee once a month at Starbucks, you can support the free speech mission of undergroundusa.com, an independent, reader-supported, and sometimes irreverent podcast and publication that gives you the real story without the bias. Go to undergroundusa.com/UUSA. That's undergroundusa.com/UUSA to receive a 25% discount on an annual subscription, bringing every new podcast and article directly into your email inbox, circumventing the censors and fact-checkers. Remember, knowledge is power, and staying informed is one of the best ways to protect our republic. Go out there and seek the truth, my friends. Subscribe to undergroundusa.com today.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, Frank, here we are. Last time we talked, it was Monday. The inauguration was going to be going on later that day. And obviously, here we are. It's Friday, and a lot has happened. But on Thursday, President Trump went to Davos virtually, and he caused quite a stir. He called out Bank of America. He said he was going to demand lower interest rates. He wants Saudi Arabia to lower the price of oil. I mean, what do you think about all this?
Well, it need to be said, we gave away the farm for the last 4 years. Not caring about what happens to our country. And that was part of the agenda that was started under Obama. That was to make the United States just another cog in the global machine.
Mm-hmm.
So what better venue than to take it to the miscreants of the World Economic Forum and say, you know what? There's a new sheriff in town. His name is Reggie Hammond. It needed to be said. So, he was fair about it. He said, hey, we're going to be lowering taxes on businesses who produce things in the United States. So I'm letting you know up front, if you produce things and you want to make them in the United States, you're going to get the best deal that there is around the globe. If you decide not to, then because we have to put America first, you're going to pay a tariff. Everybody wants to say it was a threat. He gave them a choice. That's, not a lot of threats come with choices. He just said there's going to be consequences for abusing the market in the United States going forward from here. And a lot of countries around the world have done that, especially China. China's come over here and they've stolen intellectual property for decades. The imbalance in trade between the United States and China is incredibly notable. And we are the number one consumer nation in the world. So if you want access to our platform, which makes other countries rich, and makes companies around the world rich because we consume, there's going to be a price for it. It's like we're Costco, and the rest of the world needs to buy a membership.
Yeah, well put. Well, and I like how you described it, Frank. The idea that he's giving people a choice. That's he's just trying to get customers really to come to the United States, and it's so much more that he's advocating for the United States, for you and for me as Americans. And it's no longer, as you said, trying to just sort of fit in or, have this sort of global agenda. Trump doesn't care about a global agenda. He wants the America First agenda, which in so many ways will actually, boil over into making things better around the world as well.
Imagine that, a president of the United States actually advocating for our country, rather than advocating for being a global neighbor, and a co-equal global neighbor. I love being a global neighbor. We do enough for the world the way it is. Just take a look at the money that we spend overseas every year, especially in countries that turn around and pee on us every Friday when it comes time to tell Allah that we're the great Satan and we need to die.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the trade imbalances between the United States and just about every other country that trades with us. It's time things be a little more equal. I'm not saying that other countries have to go broke in doing business with us, but there's a way for everybody to be happy here instead of always gouging the American market, bleeding it until there's nothing left so that the golden goose ends up getting destroyed at the end of the day. There's no reason that has to happen. And Trump is saying, hey, we're going to do a laissez-faire market here from this point forward. And if you don't like it, then we're going to make it really not.
Mm-hmm. Well, I really, go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, we're going to take control of our destiny. We're not just going to sit here being the number one economy in the world, besides, they like to say China's eclipsed us, but that's a false economy because of the way that they do their business over there. It's not capitalism. It's this hybrid commu-capitalism.
Right.
So you want access to the number one economy in the world? It's like I said, we're like the Costco. You've got to buy the membership.
Exactly. Well, I like what happened. There was a World Economic Forum discussion, I think the day before Trump addressed them, where one of the members there said, Trump didn't just win the election, but he beat us. And he went on to kind of clarify it as the intellectual, managerial people who think that they can sort of run everything, basically. And I thought that was really, really profound. It was right on point.
Oh, it was telling, both technically and theoretically. These are the people that finance elections from overseas in roundabout ways when they shouldn't be getting involved in anything. You take a look at the money pipeline coming from these people, and you start to see that they interfere in our elections all the time.
So what do you think about that? I mean, are they what do they mean? We're just going to acknowledge that he's got a new name chosen. So every AP story that refers to the Gulf of Mexico, we'll have to say President Trump really wants to call it the Gulf of America, I guess.
Kind of reiterates the announcement that he's going to call it the Gulf of America every time, doesn't it?
Yep.
Right. I mean, it defeats the purpose of defiance when you're going to restate what happened every single time. You're just stating we're not going along with that. That's all you're doing. So now we know, and anybody who is aware, has understood this for quite a long time, that the AP tries to rule the narrative rather than just reporting the news.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't, and remember, the AP it's a very potent organization because every single newspaper in the world pulls from the AP feed. From local to national to international. The New York Times does it, the Chicago Tribune does it, your local paper does it. They all pull from the AP because that's the way the AP is marketed. So when they decide something stupid like this, it trickles all the way down. So it's just one more reason for you to be very judicious in where you consume your news, because the AP has proven itself over the years to not only be biased, they've proven that they will actually manipulate a narrative to achieve an outcome in their articles, and they've been caught. Mm-hmm. Time after time doing it. Not as bad as Reuters. Reuters was doctoring pictures and everything else. They're horrible. But AP, they have a bent, and they always employ it. So you shouldn't be surprised at this. You just need to acknowledge it, point it out, and realize that when they do this, okay, well, it's in the Gulf of Mexico, and Donald Trump says it's now the Gulf of America.
Right.
That they're reaffirming their bias that they've decided they're going to try and manipulate the narrative.
Indeed. Well, talk about the narrative, Frank. Donald Trump mentioned something about Bank of America in his speech to Davos. And he called out Bank of America especially, saying, hey, you've been not been doing business for conservatives and this kind of thing. And then suddenly Bank of America puts out a statement saying, no, that's not true. We welcome conservatives. But there are a lot of stories about people getting literally, I guess the new term would be debanked. But Trump, see, this is one of his strong suits. He can just blurt this stuff out and put it out there. And then suddenly it becomes a big news story again.
Bank of America has been doing this for a while. And you really should look at, if you're a Bank of America client, look into the genesis of your bank. It's Italian. They just have the name Bank of America. I'm serious. That's the genesis of the Bank of America. It was started overseas. It was an Italian entity. And they have been doing this manipulation of the public for quite a long time. During COVID, they were the ones pushing apps that would track you.
Mm-hmm.
There were COVID trackers. They wanted to make sure that they could figure out how to use their banking apps to track your movements, not only for COVID, but also for, well, we're going to be doing mileage things with your car in order to help with the environment. We're going to be able to use our app to track you. Consumer Reports had an entire campaign against the Bank of America for several years in the beginning of the Biden administration. So, don't let the name fool you. The Bank of America has nothing to do with it. So Trump's right to call them out.
Mm-hmm.
And if you, like I said, if you're a customer, they were another bank that was giving preferential treatment to illegal aliens in them being able to establish bank accounts here in the United States and get their money back to Mexico and to all points south of the border. So they're not a friend of the United States. They weren't a friend of the United States during the housing crisis of 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're a customer of Bank of America, think about moving to a bank that actually gives a damn about the United States. I don't know. Old Glory's kind of good, but I'm just biased.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, I tell you, Frank, again, President Trump has this unique ability, unique position, because even right after the election, he's starting talking about Greenland. And everybody said this is the silliest thing we've ever heard until they started learning about Greenland, about Arctic issues and security issues, national security issues, and in that part of the world. And Trump didn't look so silly anymore. They keep trying to make him look that way. But this is very similar when he calls out Bank of America, because I guarantee you more and more people will say, well, why would he say something like that?
Well, and that's his modus operandi. We talked about this in the very beginning when the Greenland issue came up. He will ask for 100 yards when his goal is actually to get 20.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets his 20, everybody goes, well, that wasn't so bad. And he's like, well, he fell for it.
Yeah.
When you're negotiating, anybody who's a good negotiator or even has a basic understanding of negotiating understands that you always ask for way more than you actually want. It's a starting point that gets whittled away. And when you get too close to what you actually want, that's when you start negotiating harder. So he wanted Greenland to be, he wanted our relationship with Greenland to be different. And way more simpatico with the United States, and especially access not only to the Arctic, but for military bases going forward, because China and Russia are both exploiting that area to their benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, we're done being the people that you just get to walk on.
Indeed.
That's what the whole idea behind America First is all about. The president's not going to say, oh, China, Iran, North Korea, you want to set up bases on the tip of Greenland so that you can exploit the Arctic? Well, we're just a co-equal person and another gray cog in the globalist machine. And if Davos says that that's the way it's supposed to go, I guess we just have to do it. Raise the middle finger. We're not doing that anymore.
Well, exactly. Well, and Frank, there's such a contrast with Donald Trump, because after the inauguration, after all of the other addresses he gave, following that, he found himself back in the White House late Monday evening, signing more executive orders. And there he was, just talking with reporters, just kind of having a free-flowing conversation with them. We haven't seen anything like that, obviously, for a very long time, really, if ever, in that exact way. But what a contrast with Joe Biden, who didn't know who you were unless he had a note card.
Yeah, it's because we have a president now that's actually aware of where he is. And I'm not poking fun at Joe Biden. We've said this since the very beginning. what happened to Joe Biden, and I don't like him. I think he's a mean human being. I obviously didn't vote for him, and I don't like him. But what happened to Joe Biden for 4 years was nothing short of elder abuse. The man was in obvious cognitive decline. So from before he was inaugurated in office, it happened on the campaign trail, and it was easy to see. And the fact that they went forward for 4 years with the blatant lie that he was okay shows you how selfish and self-centered the people on the far left actually are.
Yes. Well, it does seem like, so much has happened in the last few days that, just in terms of volume of stuff, that it does feel like it's been going on for quite a while, but it's very short.
Oh, and we can't lose sight of the goal. We need to purge the holdovers from the previous two Democrat administrations as we go forward. Have to multitask here. Mm-hmm. There is a story that came out midweek that Jake Sullivan was literally instructing holdovers in the new administration to resist the agenda going forward. So this idea that, and I've been saying this, and you're going to hear me say it again and again and again. If you're going to turn the page, you need to make sure you turn the page completely, and that means getting rid of the people who will obstruct. The job is just beginning, and executive orders don't make the presidency. Yes, they're a wonderful start, but you need to get rid of the people who are not on board with the agenda from top to bottom in every department and agency. They have to go. And if they resist, then you transfer them to the middle of freaking nowhere for 4 years and make them move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Render them inert.
Yeah, you're going to the South Pole. You want to play that game? We got a new office. It's a rubber room, just like the teachers' unions did in New York, when the teachers wouldn't get with the program about teaching the socialist agenda that they adopted. They had them go to a central location, just sit there all day long with no students because they couldn't fire them. All right, well, you don't want to get with the program? You're going to the northern tip of Alaska. We'll make it hurt. So that's the way it has to go. And the other thing that we've got to remember is that every executive order that is being put into effect, Congress has to follow up with legislation to codify these things into law. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, these executive orders, they can be reversed with the next Democrat administration.
Right. Well, exactly right. Yeah.
So Congress has a part in this to make these things permanent. And you know how that happens? We have to keep the pressure on. You've heard me say that before, and that's another thing you're going to hear me say again and again and again. This whole campaign, and Obama taught us, if nothing else, that the campaign never stops. If they're going to do it, we must do it. Mm-hmm. So we've got to stay engaged with the people that we send to Washington, D.C. and Congress saying, Trump did an executive order about this. How are you following up with legislation? And I want to hear about it in the media that you're moving something forward, or there will be consequences come next election cycle for you.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. That would be quite the campaign foundation for anybody who wants to primary somebody who's not moving these kinds of things forward.
Absolutely. And that needs to be the pressure. If you're not going to do it, we'll find someone who will. And that means we have to jettison the antiquated idea that, well, our guy's good 85% of the time, so we're just going to stick with him. They get pressure too. Mm-hmm. There's no problem with challenging someone in a primary. And that's what primaries are for, to send the message intra-party. So no one should get a free ride in a primary. Mary. If they're not towing the line with the agenda that they got elected on, they need to feel pressure.
Mm-hmm.
But that only comes from us. If we're just going to sit back, fat, dumb, and happy, watching reality TV and then wonder why it didn't happen next election, that's our fault for not being engaged.
Yep. You're right on track with that. We got a text message. It's kind of an interesting one from a listener. They say they voted for Trump 3 times, but they think that the president is wrong about Pete Hegseth. And Hegseth, of course, he cleared the hurdle here to go to the vote. We might see it today. I'm not sure that it'll be on Friday. But what do you think about the Hegseth nomination, and where do you see it going?
Well, anything is a better choice than what we had.
Yeah.
So people on the right can have their opinions about the people who have been nominated, but the way that I see Pete Hegseth, his time at Fox News branded him a journalist, and that's it. Coming from a nonprofit organization into journalism, he's a talking head and blah, 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 blah. Take a look at his military record.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he was appointed here, and the fact that he's loyal. Man had boots on the ground. He's decorated. So he's a much better choice than Lloyd Austin, who proved to be a woke agent of DEI and a destroyer of our U.S. military. Hegseth is someone who actually believes in the warrior and wants to streamline the mission statement. The one thing that I enjoyed hearing was that he was going to make sure that mission was about war fighting and nothing else. Bravo.
Mm-hmm.
For way many years, it was about nation building. Pentagon shouldn't be involved with nation building. That's the State Department's problem. Maybe the State Department should get out of trying to be a global partner with the World Economic Forum, and I think they will under Rubio, and go back to their mission statement. They represent the United States around the world. You want a nation build? Figure it out over there.
Right.
Our military should just be feared everywhere and welcomed by people who are being oppressed by tyrannical regimes. That's it.
Yep. You're exactly right. And you mentioned Rubio over at State Department, because the focus obviously is always going to be primarily on Donald Trump, but Rubio has his work cut out for him, and trying to bring all this into line is so jarring. We haven't really seen anything quite like it, with the exception of the first Trump administration. But there is a lot of seismic shifts that have to occur here.
And they have to be abrupt and jagged. They can't be, okay, well, we're working on it. He's got to fire whole legions of people who ever had ideological sympathies with any leftist position, and that means a gigantic culling at Foggy Bottom.
Indeed.
When Susan Rice was there, when she first came in, they always give a big speech the first day about the agenda that they're gonna be implementing when the new Secretary of State comes in. There were many division heads over there who called their teams into the office after her speech and said, "That's all fine and dandy, but we're just going to wait her out because she'll probably be gone in 4 years."
Mm-hmm.
So we can't have that mindset anymore. When a new president comes in, the State Department is charged, because they serve at the pleasure of the president, of executing the agenda that's brought in. They don't get to be an independent organization with their own thinking process about what they believe is right and wrong. And that's been a problem going forward. Every time a Republican administration comes to power, is that people at DOJ now, over at State, at the IRS, all of the alphabet agencies and all of the departments, they just say, well, if we just wait it out. That's why I've been calling for a culling in all these things. Anybody who's a political or ideological operative in these organizations, they have to be retired or sent to Alaska.
Or Antarctica.
Antarctica.
Yeah.
You're listening to Underground USA.
The foundation of our great nation lies in our unwavering commitment to freedom, and at its core is the principle of free speech. It's not just a right, but a duty to speak our minds, respectfully debate, and challenge ideas. Today, free speech is under attack by the forces of the deep state and the globalists. We must all do our part to protect free speech, for without it, we'd be lost in a sea of woke conformity and censorship. We have the right. Protect it.
Wokeism is a threat to the very foundations of our great nation and to the very principles of liberty and justice. The goal of wokeism is to divide us, pitting Americans against one another based on race, gender, and identity. This ideology undermines free speech and open dialogue, which are the bedrock of our republic. It promotes censorship and cancels anyone who dares to challenge its extreme agenda. We must stand against this cultural Marxism and protect our constitutional rights. Say no to wokeism.
You're listening to Underground USA.
Before we go, a quick point. It's beautiful that President Trump is enacting a flurry of much-needed executive orders meant to reverse the institutionalized wokeism and neo-Marxism that has been implemented by the Obama-Biden era. But without legislative action to codify these EOs into law, they can all simply be reversed with any incoming leftist administration in the future. Then we're back to square one. We must keep the pressure on our elected Congress creatures to craft and institute constitutionally sound law that codifies the Trump doctrine, including his moves to end DEI, secure the border, and unleash our energy sector. Without those pieces of legislation, it's all just an exercise in short-term gratification and long-term ideological masturbation. We have to be smart this time around. And I'd like to give a quick shout-out to Bobby D. and Sheila S., who have, ever since the days of the New Media Journal and the nonprofit BasicsProject.org, been steadfast supporters. Please know you are appreciated now as you were appreciated then. If you like the podcast, please head on over to Underground USA and sign up for our Substack. It brings every new podcast and every new article directly into your email inbox. And remember, please, talk politics, current events, and religion with your family, friends, colleagues, and acquaintances. When we have these conversations, we come to realize we have more in common than in difference. And when that happens, we all become Americans instead of the divided, balkanized demographics that the deep state wants us to be. That's how they get their power, cobbling together that 51% of the disgruntled over the very few issues that we actually disagree upon. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no wokeism, no political correctness. My name is Frank Salvato.